But the silver car unexpectedly fish-tailed around, skidding to a stop with the passenger door open just a few feet from me. "Get in!" a furious voice commanded. It was amazing how instantaneously the choking fear vanished, amazingly how suddenly the feeling of security washed over me, even before I was off the street. As soon as I heard his voice, I jumped into the seat, slamming the door shut behind me. It was dark in the car, no light had come on with the opening of the door, and I could barely see his face in the glow from the dashboard. The tires squealed as he spun around to face north, accelerating too quickly, swerving toward the stunned men on the street. I caught a glimpse of them, diving for the sidewalk as we straightened out and sped toward the harbor. "Put on your seatbelt," he commanded, and I realized I was clutching the seat with both hands. I quickly obeyed. The snap as the belt connected was loud in the darkness. He took a sharp left, racing forward, blowing through several stop signs without a pause. But I felt utterly safe, and for the moment totally unconcerned about where we were going. I stared at his face in profound relief that went beyond my sudden deliverance. I studied his flawless features in the limited light, waiting for my breath to return to normal, until it occurred to me that his expression was murderously angry. "Are you okay?" I asked, surprised at how hoarse my voice sounded. "No," he said curtly, and his tone was livid. I sat in silence, watching his face while his blazing eyes stared straight ahead, until the car came to a sudden stop. I glanced around, but it was too dark to see anything beside the vague outline of dark trees crowding the roadside. We weren't in town anymore. "Bella?" he asked, his voice tight, controlled. "Yes?" My voice was still rough. I tried to clear my throat quietly. "Are you all right?" He still didn't look at me, but the fury was plain on his face. "Yes," I croaked softly. "Distract me, please," he ordered. "I'm sorry, what?" He exhaled sharply. "Just prattle about something unimportant until I calm down." He clarified, closing his eyes and pinching the bridge of his nose with his thumb and forefinger. I racked my brain for something trivial. "I'm going to run over Tyler Crowley tomorrow before school." He was still squeezing, his eyes closed, but the corner of his mouth twitched. "Why?" "He's telling everyone that he's taking me to prom. Either he's insane or he's still trying to make up for almost killing me last... well, you remember it. And he thinks prom is somehow the correct way to do this. So I figure if I endanger his life, then we're even, and he can't keep trying to make amends. I don't need enemies, and maybe Lauren would back off if he left me alone. I might have to total his Sentra, though. If he doesn't have a ride, he can't take anyone to prom," I babbled on. "I heard about that." He sounded a bit more composed. "You did?" I asked in disbelief, my previous irritation flaring. "If he's paralyzed from the neck down, he can't go to the prom either," I muttered, refining my plan. Edward sighed and finally opened his eyes. "Better?" "Not really." I waited, but he didn't speak again. He leaned his head back against the seat, staring at the ceiling of the car. His face was rigid. "What's wrong?" My voice came out in a whisper. "Sometimes I have a problem with my temper, Bella." He was whispering too, and as he stared out the window his eyes narrowed into slits. "And it wouldn't be helpful for me to turn around and hunt down those..." He didn't finish his sentence, looking away, struggling for a moment to control his anger again. "At least," he continued, "that's what I'm trying to convince myself." Oh, the words seemed inadequate, but I couldn't think of a better response. We sat in silence again. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was past 6:30. Jessica and Angela will be worried," I murmured. I was supposed to meet them. He started the engine without another word, turning around smoothly and speeding back towards town. We were under the streetlights in no time at all, still going too fast, weaving with ease through the cars slowly cruising the boardwalk. He parallel parked against the curb in a space I would have thought much too small for the Volvo, but he slid in effortlessly in one try. I looked out the window to see the lights of La Bella Italia, and Jess and Angela just leaving, pacing anxiously away from us. "How did you know where?" I began, but then I just shook my head. I heard the door open and turned to see him getting out. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm taking you to dinner." He smiled slightly, but his eyes were hard. He stepped out of the car and slammed the door. I fumbled with my seatbelt, and then hurried to get out of the car as well. He was waiting for me on the sidewalk. He spoke before I could. Go stop Jessica and Angela before I have to track them down, too. I don't think I could restrain myself if I ran into your friends again. Your other friends again. I shivered at the threat in his voice. Jess! Angela! I yelled after them, waving when they turned. They rushed back to me, the pronounced relief on their faces simultaneously changing to surprise as they saw who I was standing next to. They hesitated a few feet from us. Where have you been? Jessica's voice was suspicious. I got lost, I admitted sheepishly, and then I ran into Edward. I gestured toward him. Would it be all right if I joined you? He asked in his silken, irresistible voice. I could see from their staggered expression that he had never unleashed his talents on them before. Sure, Jessica breathed. Actually, Bella, we already ate while we were waiting. Sorry, Angela confessed. That's fine. I'm not hungry, I shrugged. I think you should eat something. Edward's voice was low but full of authority. He looked up at Jessica and spoke slightly louder. Do you mind if I drive Bella home tonight? That way you won't have to wait while she eats. No problem, I guess. She bit her lip, trying to figure out from my expression whether that was what I wanted. I winked at her. I wanted nothing more than to be alone with my perpetual savior. There were so many questions that I couldn't bombard him with till we were by ourselves. Okay, Angela was quicker than Jessica. See you tomorrow, Bella. Edward. She grabbed Jessica's hand and pulled her toward the car, which I could see a little ways away, parked across First Street. As they got in, Jess turned and waved, her face eager with curiosity. I waved back, waiting for them to drive away before I turned to face him. Honestly, I'm not hungry, I insisted, looking up to scrutinize his face. His expression was unreadable. Humor me. He walked to the door of the restaurant and held it open with an obstinate expression. Obviously, there would be no further discussion. I walked past him into the restaurant with a resigned sigh. The restaurant wasn't crowded. It was the off-season in Port Angeles. The host was female, and I understood the look in her eyes as she assessed Edward. She welcomed him a little more warmly than necessary. I was surprised by how much that bothered me. She was several inches taller than I was, and unnaturally blonde. A table for two? Oh, a table for two? His voice was alluring, whether he was aiming for that or not. I saw her eyes flicker to me and then away, satisfied by my obvious ordinariness and by the cautious, no-contact space Edward kept between us. She led us to a table big enough for four in the center of the most crowded area of the dining floor. I was about to sit, but Edward shook his head at me. Perhaps something more private? He insisted, quietly to the host. I wasn't sure, but it looked like he smoothly handed her a tip. I'd never seen anyone refuse a table except in old movies. Sure, she sounded as surprised as I was. She turned and led us around a partition to a small ring of booths, all of them empty. How's this? Perfect. He flashed his gleaming smile, dazing her momentarily. She shook her head, blinking. Your server will be right out. She walked away unsteadily. You really shouldn't do that to people, I criticized. It's hardly fair. Do what? Dazzle them like that. She's probably hyperventilating in the kitchen right now. He seemed confused. Oh, come on, I said dubiously. You have to know the effect you have on people. He tilted his head to one side, and his eyes were curious. I dazzle people? You haven't noticed? Do you think everybody gets their way so easily? He ignored my questions. Do I dazzle you? Frequently, I admitted. And then our server arrived, her face expectant. The hostess had definitely dished behind the scenes, and this new girl didn't look disappointed. She flipped a strand of short hair behind one ear and smiled with unnecessary warmth. Hello, my name is Amber, and I'll be your server tonight. What can I get you to drink? I didn't miss that she was speaking only to him. He looked at me. I'll have a Coke. It sounded like a question. 2 Cokes, he said. I'll be right back with that, she assured him with another unnecessary smile. But he didn't see it. He was watching me. What? I asked, when she left. His eyes stayed fixed on my face. How are you feeling? I'm fine, I replied, surprised by his intensity. You don't feel dizzy, sick, cold? Should I? He chuckled at my puzzled tone. Well, I'm actually waiting for you to go into shock. His face twisted up into that perfect, crooked smile.